Great. Well, welcome Facebook Live participants. Welcome in-person participants. Thank you all for bringing your attention this way around 4 o'clock. We know this is a tough time slot, so Beth and I tried to plan something interactive for you guys. It's also kind of keeping it light, but keeping it real as well. Everyone's done such a great job today. I've been so inspired hearing from everybody who's been speaking, so it's nice to be able to kind of ride on that momentum that's been built today. But I want to introduce myself. My name is Delia Hagan. I'm a program director at Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. And some of you may know Mentor. Hopefully you are aware of us. If not, hopefully you will be by the end of this session. And this is my colleague, Beth Fraster. She is a Chief Program Officer at Mass Mentoring Partnership, which is an affiliate of Mentor in Massachusetts. So welcome, Beth. Thanks for being here with me. I want to say a couple words about Mentor and then pass it over to Beth to kind of get us started. And Beth, I don't know if you want to introduce Mass Mentoring. Okay. So Mentor is a national organization that has 26 state and local affiliates across the country. And many of you, raise your hand if you are connected to one of our affiliates, or if you know of us, you partner with us. Great. So that's what I was hoping to see. Hopefully on Facebook Live, folks are typing in, "We're so excited, Mentor. Yes, we're connected to you." We want to see that. We really want you guys to know that we are your cheerleaders. We are a partner of yours. We want you to be aware of us because we are providing training and technical assistance for Success Mentors communities, hopefully all of you. And if you aren't aware of us yet, there's a postcard on your table, if you have one, that shows you how to get connected to us and how to get linked up to us. So I want to just briefly introduce some of our other affiliates that are in the room. Whitney Maston is here from Nebraska. We have Patrice, who is here from Maryland. She is our new emerging Baltimore affiliate. And we have Dave Martis, who is here from Michigan. Hi, Dave. And of course, Beth. So again, just wanted to say a couple brief words before I kick it over to Beth. We designed this session because we really wanted to sort of bring back all the lessons that we have, all the things that we're talking about today. We want to think about the impact of our work from the perspective of young people. We know that often their voices aren't heard quite as much as we would like them to, even though we really try to channel them in the work that we do. But we wanted to do an activity that really kind of brings it back to, what this work means from their perspective. And so we're also so thrilled after that first activity that Beth is going to lead. We have a great panel, a great group of 3 folks, leaders in this work who are right here in this room, that we're going to ask to join us and just share some insights about how they've cultivated a culture of mentoring in their school and district. So we'll be inviting them up for the second half of our session. But first, I'll kick it to Beth to kind of kick off an interactive activity for you all.
Thank you so much. So as Delia said, I'm from the Mass Mentoring Partnership, and we really work across the state of Massachusetts to talk about relationships. The core of any mentoring is about relationships, so we work with all youth-serving organizations across the state as relationships as the lever for whatever outcome they want to meet. So we work with schools, we work with faith-based organizations, we work with youth development and recreation programs, because relationships are really at the heart of what matters for us, and what drives us, and what has led me to do this work for over 25 years. And so what I want to talk about, because I think we get lost, and I think the data is really important, and all the elements of Success Mentors is really important, and I want you to remember everything that you heard because it really matters, but also at the heart of it is that the relationships that we're creating in schools is what's going to help young people to thrive and for communities to be resilient and vibrant. And that's what this is all about. So that's why we're here. So for the rest of the afternoon, we're really going to focus on relationships. We're going to focus on the heart of the matter, and then the other stuff will then fall right back into place again. So we're going to talk a little bit. At Mass Mentoring, we use a lot of research, and we try to bring all the research to our constituents as much as we can. And so we've been looking at a lot of the research out of the Center for Promise, which is part of America's Promise. Anyone here has ever heard of America's Promise? Yay. This is great research. This is youth-centric, youth-focused research. I encourage everyone to take a look at everything that they write and use it with young people and more seasoned adults. So the Center for Promise actually went out and they wanted to find out why young people left school and why were they not graduating on the trajectory of 4 years, all right? So they went out and they surveyed over 3,000 students, and they did focus groups with over 200 students. And they found out 4 things. So the first thing was that they actually went out to find out why people drop out of high school. And they first found out that none of the people who left high school felt that they dropped out. They felt like they were navigating their lives the best that they could, and they made decisions that were the best and the well-informed as they could make at the time that they were making those decisions. So their first report is called Don't Call Us Dropouts. And it's really important and I've changed my language, and to think about the language that we use when we talk about students who leave school. And they also found out 4 things in that research. So they found out, number 1 is that students leave school because of a cluster of factors. There's usually not one reason why people leave school. There's a lot of things going on in the lives of young people that have them make the decision that at that time, the best decision is that this system's not working for me and I need to navigate my life differently. They also found out that the young people who left school were navigating toxic environments. In fact, 66% of students who leave high school were dealing with 3 to 12 ACE adverse childhood experiences, and a quarter of them had 6 or more. So these young people had toxic things going on in their life, and that school wasn't really the place where they could get the support that they needed to deal with those things. The third thing they found out was that connectedness was really important to all the students who left school. That actually these students, contrary to what most people believe, wanted adults and peers in their life that they could count on. And they were looking for these relationships. And sometimes these relationships led people to school, and sometimes these relationships led people away from school. But all the young people that they spoke to wanted relationships. And the fourth really important thing that they found out was that these young people were resilient, and that when reconnected, did really well in life. And also, when they left school, many of them did well in life. And again, contrary to what we believe, that school just wasn't working for them didn't mean that nothing was working for them. And so we need to look for these people's strengths. But more importantly, we want young people to stay in school, because we do know that graduating from high school really helps people to do well in life further on along the way. And so the Center for Promise went back out there, and they want to find out, well, what would make a difference? What would make things different for young people, and how do we keep them in school? And we use this when we talk about success mentors, because we're talking about high school, but this didn't start in high school. So if you remember the first finding, there's a cluster of things that happen while young people leave school, and it doesn't just start happening in 9th grade. It happens starting very early on. So we're asking you, no matter what grades you're working with, to think about what is it that's happening now in young people's lives that lead them to this place when they get to high school, and how do we intervene now in young people's lives so they don't get to this place? So when the Center for Promise went back out, they wanted to find out what was going to make a difference and keep kids in school and keep young people coming to school, even if it took more than 4 years. But they talked about having uninterrupted high school years. And what would they do? And so Delia and I wanted to bring the voice of young people to teach this lesson to us. So keep watching. And people on Facebook, stay tuned and watch with us.
Just so you all know, as we're setting up the video, we do have some discussion questions that we're going to ask you about after the videos. If you want to kind of cheat and take a look at what those are, we welcome that kind of cheating during this session.
Do we want to tell the people at home what it is?
Yep, absolutely.
So why don't we'll review the questions for those folks on Facebook as well. Oh, here it is. So while you're listening to the voice of these young people, please think about what stood out as you listened to the voices of these young people. What did you hear? I always say, what was your aha moment? And then, what are the formal and informal ways that young people encounter supportive relationships in your school? And then finally, what are the barriers to creating empowering supportive relationships?
It was like I never thought that anybody would care about me like a family would, and it's like, no, this random woman cares about me like my own mother.
I felt like nobody around me cared, so I really didn't care.
During my school career, I never had someone who simplified the whole process.
And I couldn't focus. I couldn't go to school because I felt like no one there understood.
Before I got locked up, everything was going in my favor.
Being frustrated, I started skipping school.
I didn't feel like they were taking the initiative to really try to help me learn the way that I learned.
I was always getting suspended. Like, I felt like I was getting picked on by teachers.
But she was like, you gonna do great things. And she meant it.
In life, all you need is a person to be willing to understand you, to listen, to give an ear, an arm, something to help you out.
Someone that's always there to help them when times are rough and to show them that this is the right way to do it.
And let that one person know about, their life and what's going on, because people just go to school and act like everything is all good, but you don't know about their life.
Are you okay? Is all they could have asked me. And things could have been a lot different.
They don't need a teacher to be like, oh, he's a bad kid, pointing the finger at him. They need, oh, you can change, They need somebody to uplift them.
I walk in this morning, she like, how you going with your classes? How many more quizzes you got to do? How many of this, how many of that? You need help with this, I got somebody to help you with that.
Miss Alvarez is one teacher I feel very connected with. She's my advisor and she really helps me stay on the ball.
My parents had always said, like, you're gonna be the first ones to graduate.
Having adults in my life who weren't family and who still believed in me, that is why I am who I am today.
I knew I was capable of doing something better than I was.
I have a chance to pull myself up.
I want to graduate.
I want to be something in life.
Okay, so because we're streaming live, what I usually would want you to do is have a small conversation about this, but I'm going to ask you to take a minute to think, and then I'm going to ask you to share your questions out so we can have like a large group discussion. It's a little bit harder, but I trust that this group is really good at it. So what were some of those ahas? And a lot of times people say, this is my school. But when you hear these voices loud in a room, I think there's always something that can stick out, and especially when we listen with the kind of listening ears that I'm asking you to listen for. So what were some of the things that you heard? And Delia's going to run around with a microphone, so. Oh. Maybe we should run around with 2 microphones.
All right. What I thought was most profound is when the young man said, all you need is a person willing to help you. And the young lady said, if someone would have asked, are you okay? It would have made a difference.
Yeah. Are you okay? It would have made a difference. And I want to just say that sometimes people might have asked a question, but it might not have been in the way that young people heard concern and care and authenticity. Right? So I don't think that schools are full of people who don't care, but are we asking the questions in ways that resonate with young people is really important to ask ourselves. Yes.
It sounded like listening to the students that what they wanted was something very simple. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't hard questions. It was just simply someone who was showing a caring attitude and showing a love or a nurturing spirit for them.
Yeah, very simple, very simple. Could you be uplifting, right? Could you believe in me? Will you take the time to ask me how I'm doing in my class? Other aha moments.
One of the aha moments was when the student asked if someone took the time to understand how I learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
One of the questions we ask when we do our PD is, what is a child who is beyond the fear of consequence fear? And we have found that a child who's beyond the fear of consequence fears being removed from an environment of love. And listening to that, it really went beyond pedagogy and the mastery of a discipline into the human dynamic. And you really heard it in the young people's voices. It wasn't yelled or screamed. It was that inner child that just says, do you see me? Can you love me? Can you help me be assertive? Can you, show me how to do what I'm looking to do in a way that I can feel it and understand it. So it was really a touching video. Great job.
Right.
What I noticed in the out of the video was that each of the students needed and wanted help. And oftentimes we see students that are disengaged. We assume that they don't care, care about school and so forth. But what they shared is that they were looking for someone to want to help them navigate through school and help them be successful. So they were seeking that and just waiting for someone to come along to be that caring advocate.
That's right. And these students were all students from across the country who had been in the focus groups of this research project who had been re-engaged. And so I also want to mention that sometimes, I don't know for you, but in my work with young people, they don't all ask this clearly. And sometimes the ask doesn't look so nice and so sharp, right? And so it's kind of our job as adults to hear the clear ask and the simplicity of it through the veil of other things, right? These young people have come back. And so maybe with a little insight and a little more wisdom they have than the young person who's still in the high school, who hasn't quite left yet. But that's our job. Our job is to kind of see that simplicity of that inner child before they leave school. Yeah.
One thing that I definitely saw was a high level of self-awareness, that they were able to say that I knew I was capable, I know that I have the ability, and that takes a level of these social and emotional skills that we're saying that they don't have, and in fact that they actually do. So just being able to see that they were able to communicate that, and in a way that was very clear.
Yeah. And how many times do our systems give up on students when they're not there yet, and then we don't get them to that point? And yet the research shows that almost all the students believed that they could succeed in school, even though no one else had ever believed in them before. So they left school and they all knew that they could do the work. They just, the other reasons made them leave school.
One of the things that caught my attention is how the young man said he was being judged because he didn't want anybody pointing at him saying he's a bad student. So he wanted some compassion. Yeah. He also talked about suspensions. And oftentimes that's when we don't want to be bothered with students. That's the first thing we do is suspend them instead of finding out what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, one more comment on that question?
I think what I like with the awareness of these young people, they were aware of how people were treating them and what was happening to them. And sometimes the adults were not aware. Mm-hmm. So I think, and the maturity of them, that they made a decision that they felt was best for them. And, sometimes I think we know what's best for them instead of asking them and talking to them and working with them.
That's right. That's right. I'll just share one. We do a lot of training for youth workers around the state, and it was so interesting that I was doing a training for some youth workers, and one of the youth workers who now is helping students to complete high school said every morning she had to wake up and clean up after her mother's drinking and drugging the night before, and every day she was late for school. And she's now working in the same high school. And still to this day, she said nobody in the school asked her why she was late every single day. And it was only because she was caring for her family that she was late. And she still made it through. And she still got her bachelor's degree. And she's now back in that school working. But to think that she's still holding that feeling that no one in the school has still asked her, why were you late every day? And then I think about that young woman who said, if only someone asked. And I just wonder for that woman, if only someone asked, could school have been easier for her? Could she have gotten supports for her mother for her? Like, what could have been different? And that was just in a training I was doing for a youth worker, just by chance, right, that story came out. So what are the formal and informal ways that young people encounter supportive relationships in your school? What are you doing now then? Because I also believe that all people in schools have great intention, And I think that what we're trying to do is raise the intention and the mindfulness of all of this, right? We know how to do this. This isn't rocket science. How do we help, though, to create the systems and get people ready to do this? This isn't like we have to retrain a lot of people about a lot of things, right? We're relational beings. We're all brought into this world to be relational. So we just have to, how do we help teachers to tap the compassion and the empathy that's needed to do this work? So what are you doing, either formally or informally? What's happening at the schools that help young people to have relationships in your building? Well, obviously, you're doing Success Mentors. Yay! But besides that, what else? Or what are you doing in Success Mentors that's working?
In Kansas City, across our district, we are embracing a trauma-informed initiative, and so we are encouraging connectedness within each and every classroom among students, but also between adults and students and between adults and each other. And so every staff meeting now should begin with some, before you dive into the work of the PD agenda, take time to find out what's going on with your colleague. How was your day? Is everything okay in your world? And so forth. And so that helps us to understand the power of a relationship and to make sure we have a temperature check on each other.
Beautiful.
In Oakland Unified School District, we focus on developing social emotional skills in our adults so that they become aware, self-aware, socially aware, and have empathy. And that has made a big difference in how relationships are developed between students and adults.
That's great. Taking the time, the resources, and the energy into the adults is so important. Thank you.
Yes, in Fresno Unified School District in California, we've seen a really dramatic increase in the number of mentors, but what we've tried to do intentionally this year is to do more training for our mentors. They have the desire to do or be connected to students, but what we wanted to do this year is really focus on giving them the skills so that not only they have those relationships, but they're able to maintain them.
Great. Great. Mentor training, bringing mindfulness and intentionality, building skills, knowledge, and attitudes that's needed to create the kinds of relationships you want. Perfect.
In Portland Public Schools, we passed a racial education equity policy about 6 years ago. And so with that, we've been working with PEG, Pacific Education Group. And there's a teacher component called CARE. And it really works on supporting teachers around building both rigor, relationship, realness, and relevance within their classroom. And they do that by identifying focal students. So while we're also working with our teachers, then we're also bringing in partners and success mentors into our schools to be able to support our students as we are also embarking on this work ourselves and on our journey.
Great. Great.
So what we do is we really do think that people know how to build relationship, but we actually train them on how to do that.
Great.
Because I don't think we were born with that innate ability to do that. So you have to teach people how to do that so that they know that you just don't walk up to somebody and think, oh, you're gonna be my friend, you know. So you have to, how do you do that? And especially teachers to students, students to teachers, students to students, and parents to students. So we intentionally provide workshops and train everybody on how to build relationships. And I think that's key all the way around, because we can't assume that people know.
Right, and even if people know some of it, because we're relational beings, so we're making relationships, whether they're healthy or not, depends. And some are healthy and some are not. We're real beings. But you're creating a common language and you're creating a framework by which your school system is going to do relationships, you're codifying the relationships so that you can use it in a way to talk about it. So that's really, really important, because when we just want people to do relationships, it could mean a lot of things to a lot of people, even whether they know how to do it or not, right? So by having a common way to talk about, do in this system, we're going to do relationships like that. That raises the value of relationship to the systemic level. And that's something that we've been talking to a lot of school systems about. It's great to have relationships going, but if you raise it to that systemic level, like a lot of you are talking about, then it can trickle down in all these different ways in everything that you do. So it can come by the programs, the policies, the way that you interact and what you expect by teacher to teacher. So really raising that value is really, really helpful. Did you have something?
I had one more thing I want to add. It's interesting, being relational beings is interesting in terms of where we are as a society right now. And when you start talking about, did we used to use relationships? Everybody knew their next door neighbor, right?
Right.
But now, as a result of societal norms and shifts, people don't even know the person who's across their peephole, and they avoid relationships so many times. One of the questions we ask is, how many people in the room consider themselves expert relationship builders? And no hands go up. Okay. So you're right, we have to now come back and raise it to a systemic level to where even our teachers in our classrooms, people are afraid of people these days. And so how do we teach them skills and strategies that enable them to learn how to create relationships? What are the strategies you can use? And so those are some of the things I think you're talking about, and how do we raise the bar so everyone understands how to build effective relationships?
Right. And we've been having real success with folks that I was nervous a little bit going to school systems to have these conversations, and yet we've been having 6-hour PD sessions because actually teachers also are grateful to have the time to talk to each other about this. That just given the time to sit back and think about it with each other is a gift that we can give them. So also assuming that we're also busy and we're like trying to think about this and they're trying to do it, and I think that people are finding that like actually getting people in the room and having this discussion, people are liking it. That we're really finding that it really works. Okay, so just to keep going here, what are some of the barriers to creating the kind of empowering relationship that we want young people to have in their schools? What gets in the way? Okay, when I ask this question, there's always one answer that comes up immediately.
Perception of time.
Oh, I like that. The perception of time. Usually everyone says time. I thank you very much. Right, the time, the perception of time. How do you fit this conversation in? And yet, when we talk about it, really, does it change if you're intentionally and mindfully creating relationships? Does it take any more time than not mindfully doing something? I don't know. Yeah, so time. But teachers also, though, in some schools are trying to have more team time to talk and to really have more time to plan, which creates better relationships and more relationships, and can talk about students' relationships more often. What else?
I would say in this era of looking at data, which is positive, what I've found, especially within the mentor world, trying to quantify it in a way, and districts struggling over that. And within that, sometimes it has caused delays, especially I think sometimes you're not always able to see the benefits of mentoring within
Right.
2-3 months. But as districts continue to push, they want to see areas like test scores and so forth
That's right.
benefit or because of mentoring. So that becomes sometimes a
Right, so we
challenge.
can look at outcomes for young people who have mentoring, but we as a field have to be able to start measuring the quality and intensity of relationships and be able to talk about that so we can be able to codify that more and measure that more. That's really important.
Take one more comment.
One more comment.
So I think a lot of times we look at data all the time, but one of the most touching data points I've ever heard was when we did a survey of young people and we asked them, is there an adult in this building who cares about you? And a huge percentage could not name one adult. That's data. That's data we should pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also challenge people. When I ran youth programs, I said that anytime someone came to talk about a young person, they could not talk to me about a young person until they named 3 positive things about that young person. And in this regard, I'm challenging schools to say, before you sit down for any IEP program, any meeting about a young person, why don't we identify the 3 people that they're connected to in the school building? Right? Start the conversation with the relationship, then move on to the other things that have to be talked about. Again, it raises the value of relationship at your school system if every meeting starts with let's identify relationships. We had a youth program actually who charted the Boys and Girls Club. Every day young people came and they made sure they tried to figure out, they mapped out how every student was connected to an adult at the Boys and Girls Club. And then for those students who didn't feel connected, then they intentionally made sure that someone was going to check in with those kids every day for a week and months and years to come and make sure that they get re-engaged. So one of the things I want you to take away from this and from the research, and I want to thank America's Promise for doing this research because we use it a lot, but also that they talk about a web of support. It doesn't take one adult in the life of young people. Young people need people to do a lot of things. They need support, they need care, they need opportunities, they need to be challenged, they need to have their voice heard. And not one person will do that. So we need to create that web. And if you heard in the voices, someone said, I needed that anchor person. I need that one person in the school who's going to then connect me to a network of adults that I need. And so I want us to also remember that the person in the school doesn't have to be everything for that young person. They could be just their anchor. They could be like, I got your back here, and I'm going to help you figure out how to navigate this system. I got your back, and I'm just going to let you know I care that you're here. I got your back and we're going to figure this out. I got your back and I'm going to ask you how you're doing. And if we can create these webs, I think we can make a big difference in our schools. And if we keep remembering to put this in the sense of relationship, then Success Mentors can be successful. All the data we're collecting can have meaning, and this can all work. Thank you.
Beth is a great partner to us here at National in terms of, really thinking about how we create a culture of relationships, how we zoom out from just mentoring best practices and think about this from the relational angle. So I appreciate all the perspective that you bring, and that activity really underscores it. The reason that Beth and I chose that activity was not, I don't know if there's criers in this audience, that video always gets me. That was not the point of the video at 4 o'clock to touch your heart necessarily, but it does sort of remind us that not only do we as practitioners need these reminders about the importance of authentic relationships and the authenticity factor being so key to young people actually benefiting from it, but also our mentors need that on a regular basis from us because their work is challenging. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we want to be your partner, because we know that's hard work to be able to support them on a regular basis. And so we hope you'll reach out to us for support with that aspect of this work, because it is so key to the success of it. So at this point, we want to transition from sort of the why to the how with our last 30 minutes with you all. And so at this point, I'd love to invite my 3 panelists up to our table here at the front. And as they do join us, I'll introduce them. I'm going to be asking them really just one loaded question, and I hope that they'll be able to speak a little bit about it to you all. It's related to this conversation that we've been having. So as they join me, I'll introduce you to them. Some of you may know them already, but our first panelist is Harold Miller, the Director of School Transformation Initiatives at Boston Public Schools. And then we also have Dr. Daryl Davis, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools. And then finally, we have Dave Martis, who is the Director of Youth Initiatives at Michigan Community Service Commission, which is also Mentor Michigan, an affiliate of Mentor National in Michigan. So excited to have all 3 of them, and let's give them a hand to say welcome. Welcome at 4:30 to our final panel of the day. So let's see, I'll sit with you. So I can... All right. So our big loaded... This is on, okay. Our big loaded question for you all, sort of related to the video that we just watched. We're hoping you can introduce yourself and just say a little bit about how you have worked at your different roles in this work to create this culture of mentoring at your schools and within your district. There's so many innovative ways that the three of you and everyone in this room has worked to do that, but we hope that you can give us a couple examples of how you've done this work. And let's start with you, Dr. Davis.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Daryl Davis, as mentioned, Kansas City Public Schools. I was fortunate enough in my previous role, 12 years in building administration, to always be a part of student mentoring at that time. Currently, in my current role, I'm charged with the development and supervision of a district-wide student mentoring initiative. Our goal is to have at least 50% of our student population involved in a mentoring program over the next 5 years, and so Success Mentors is a huge component of that. It's the backbone of our mentoring strategy. To answer the question as to one of the ways in which we're helping to create a culture of mentoring, it is leading by example. We've had nearly 20 central office members who have been trained as Success Mentors, who will be matched to students across 12 buildings. It's important for us to, for staff persons to know that they see leadership in the building, that we show that this is important, that mentoring is a strategy that we are fully embracing. We also have another 20 or so central office members who are signed up for one of our upcoming trainings, and so we plan to lead by example not only for the benefit of students, but also to help that trickle down and make sure that our principals, our teachers, other employees in the buildings are also getting involved in this strategy, and then also, of course, leveraging the community members. We've been able to publicize their opportunities to get involved, and many of them have joined this effort as well. So that's Kansas City.
Excellent, thank you. And Dave, why don't you take it from here?
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave, or David, or I say sometimes, just joking around, there's so many Daves, call me Vid. So whatever you're most comfortable with. I am the Youth Initiatives Director. It's the Michigan Community Service Commission. The Michigan Community Service Commission is the lead organization for volunteerism in the state of Michigan, and Mentor Michigan falls under that umbrella. As Delia mentioned, we're an affiliate of Mentor, which is a top-notch organization. I think they're absolutely incredible. So we're fortunate enough to get resources from them. With Mentor Michigan being in a government agency, it has its blessings and its curses. One of the things that I could go on and talk about my background. My background has been in positive youth development. My wife and I ran a program for the Mott Foundation Leadership Academy in Flint, and it wasn't really looked at as a mentoring program, but a lot of the kids that we came across, it was specifically inner city youth that we became really good friends with, and it was one of those ones where we felt that we had a positive impact on their lives, and some of them, I mean, however many years later, keep telling us that, wow, you had a positive impact on us. There were several, and I'm probably preaching to the choir on here. If you have done direct service in economically challenged areas, there's some, it's you do everything you can, but you just have to make the realization at the end of the day, some horses ain't thirsty. And I've used that before. You have to try to do everything you can, but at some point you have to make the realization, wow, I did everything I could. Because there were kids that I've come across in the past that, one program in particular we did, there were a group of students that came in, and you could tell right away, 2 out of the 5 were going to be incredibly successful, regardless of what we did. And fast forward however many years later, they are incredibly successful. The others, there are a few that of the 5 that are imprisoned, and one is dead. But it's one of those things, you just have to do what you can. So from a program delivery standpoint, I think you have to break down the differences. As we were talking about earlier, I think you need to find that commonality between mentors and mentees. I did a professional development at a school one time, And there were older teachers that were there and younger teachers, and they weren't getting along. So I ended up, one of the very first questions that I asked was, what's your most embarrassing moment? So the young teachers replied, and then some of the older teachers who had more embarrassing moments. So they just saw that there was that common approach. So with Success Mentors, I think what I've seen that's cool with this is there are natural relationships that are already transpiring, is just building on that. So the more that we can have of that, just a positive influence in somebody's life, I think the better. And whenever I come across somebody that's going to be a mentor, I think about my own life too, just being involved in mentoring and being a positive role model. It impacts my whole life, my decision making and everything. Because I think about I have two sons at home. One's a senior this year and the other's a freshman. And it's just one of those things. If I make a bad decision, I kind of feel their beady eyes looking at me someplace. So I just want to try to invoke that. And having a positive culture, mentoring culture, I think is huge. Just having that culture of somebody to care for you. So many children don't have that opportunity. So my life's passion, my life's work is to make sure that every child that needs a mentor ends up getting a mentor, and it's a quality relationship.
Thank you, Dave. And Harold, you want to finish us off with this question?
Could you ask the question one last time?
Absolutely. And I probably could have rephrased it as well, because thinking about the video, what we're talking about is young people who are looking for opportunities and looking for authentic relationships, connecting with adults in the school environment. So I'm looking to hear from you about the way in which you have been able to enable that at your school and district. So how have you enabled a culture of mentoring to exist so that students and caring adults can connect with one another?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Harold Miller. I'm Director of School Transformation Initiatives in the Boston Public School System, which means I do a lot of things, but most importantly, really figuring out how and what are we doing with our students, particularly our most marginalized students. So I think I work in the Office of Opportunity Achievement Gaps, and a lot of our work is around awareness. That's the beginning phase of what are we doing, why are we doing it, as well as a deep reflection of self. We also use the inside out theory, which is not beating yourself up yet, but more so let's look at our strengths and our weaknesses before we go out and perform this work, because we must be on the highest ground before we can implement the work. So we would like to kind of step back before we dive in to really become aware of ourselves and the work and intersectionality of the work ahead. Because as we know, there are multiple phenomena going on right now that affect the progress of our students. They all intersect to create these pigeonholes for our students. Many well-intentioned initiatives, but too far off and they pigeonhole our students. So we really want to start with awareness. And when it comes to mentorship specifically, I'm learning more each day. Beth, who I work with closely, every day I'm learning. So even though awareness, when it comes to our students, when it comes to mentoring, there are so many different levels of mentoring. Success Mentors is one type of mentoring, but as you expand and look at the early warning system database, you start realizing, wait a minute, this student might need Success Mentors, but this student might need a different type of mentorship. So it's broadening our horizon around maybe even certain tiers of mentoring. So it's a continued journey, but we are learning that information right now.
Great, thank you so much. And the reason that we wanted to feature all three of you is because of the way in which you've used partnerships to really elevate this work. You've partnered with others, with community partners. You've relied on others to help you sort of promote this and allow it to grow. So I wondered if any of you could speak to that, or just give really one tip that you would have for this audience about how we can all better support students and adults in connecting in the school environment.
So 2 questions.
So either or, whichever speaks to you more, I'd say.
What was the first? Could you just repeat that first?
Yeah, so the first question about partnership and just, all three of you having really built partnerships that enabled this work to grow. And if there's something you'd share about that, or just another tip that you'd have for folks about how to support this work.
So partnerships, I will definitely like to speak on that. We have Mass Mentors, Johns Hopkins, all here. It's an app, or actually a website from through a person, Joanna Smith from Harvard University. So we're excited about that, which specifically monitors our mentor-mentee touch points. So that's specific to mentorship. And obviously, we have an early warning system database. Our director of EWS, Renee Boudreau, in Boston Public Schools. So the data system obviously shows us a menu of data, but the All Here app shows us specifically mentor-mentee interactions. We also now are partnering with the City of Boston, Mayor's Office, Suffolk University. We have our Department of Youth Services, our Juvenile Detention Center. It's expanding to more partnerships. So we have to obviously reassess what that looks like. But I do have one thing I want to say as some type of advice or maybe a practice to think about. If every adult, this is something that I've been a principal, I've been a teacher, an assistant principal, and now I'm at the district level. And I just believe if every adult, just one practice, shook every kid's hand. So as the principal or assistant principal, you're at the front shaking hands. And then each classroom teacher is doing that. Every period, every class. Because what that allowed me as a school leader to do is feel the pulse of a student. And you can instantly, hey, how you doing? You want food? Okay, what do you need? Let's talk. If every adult did that and it became systemic, I think that's one practice we can aim for in our schools. It's not gonna erase everything, but it will allow us to be ahead of anything that's coming through our doors. So that's just one practice. I do have one more thing I do wanna say. If we also believe, and I've seen remnants of it here today, but, and I don't know where I got this quote from, but if we really believe that every student that we deal with and work with every day, we really believe that they can change the world. And we authentically believe that. That also is a powerful, it needs to be intrinsic though, so I can't tell you to do it. It has to be natural, but I think that's a powerful message as well.
Thank you so much, Harold. And Daryl, would you like to respond to the same question about just one tip you'd have, or just the importance of partnership or the way that you've done that?
Yes, thank you. In Kansas City, as mentioned, we have a goal to have 50% of students involved in a mentoring program. And so in order to accomplish that, we know that we could not do that without the aid and support of community organizations. And so several corporations have joined forces, as well as numerous mentoring programs have joined forces and have partnered with the school district. And though they may have their own focus, maybe they are reading mentors, or maybe they focus on character or leadership development. One thing we did recently, brought in all 10 partners. For example, there's a local hospital. The nurses there are going to mentor our nursing students from our career and tech high school. But all 10 partners came in for a meeting recently, and we shared with them the national crisis around chronic absenteeism and how it's impacting students across the nation. But then, more importantly, we showed them our own data in Kansas City, and that we have 18.5% of our students fell in that chronic absence category last year. Also showed them a staggering statistic that 37% of our ninth graders were chronically absent. So more than a third of our students missed at least 18 days of school. And we then help them to see that the absence is not the problem. It's actually a symptom of a deeper problem. And we wanted them to understand what we're trying to accomplish as a school district, so that they can then support this strategy and help us collectively tackle chronic absence. And so we explained it doesn't take away from the curriculum that you follow, doesn't take away from your model, but within those conversations, within those relationships that you're building each and every week, we want you to embed attendance tracking. We want you to reinforce the importance of daily attendance. But then most importantly, make sure you're helping to get to the root cause of why students are not coming to school. And so they were able to understand that a little bit more clearly, and they have all signed on to say, we'll help you in this endeavor.
So I'm just going to add one more thing. So I also I have to always remind myself and those I work with around Success Mentors is that we also want to remember that we're looking for strengths and we're looking for their gifts and we're looking for what's going right. And so remember that young people who are chronically absent probably have a lot of people telling them what's going wrong. And so when you were talking about the root cause of why a young person is not coming to school, and we're talking about shaking hands and feeling the pulse, let's remember that this model and relationships are about bringing out what's going good. Because we can get bogged down in what's not going well. And there's enough people in this young person's life. So I keep reminding our mentors and everything that you're not the truant officer. In fact, you can even badmouth the truant officer with that person if you have to, because that's the person who's doing their job. Your job is to say, so how does it feel that the truant officer said that to you? How does it feel to be chronically absent? How does it feel to know that it's not going well for you? Like, those are the kinds of questions that could also be helpful. But also, I'm just glad to see you today. Let's just start today for today, you know? So I just want to remember strength-based, this part of this all too.
Absolutely.
And Beth, I'm happy to have you speak, and actually, Dave, wondering if you can finish us off just from the perspective of a community partner, someone who has partnered with a school district to make this work possible. Could you just speak a little bit to that partnership and maybe some tips that you might have for schools that are looking to make those partnerships a reality?
Yeah, I can talk about that, but this was so interesting what we were talking about there, if I can add to that. I think that's critically important for this to be successful too, is just drawing on what you mentioned with strengths and gifts and what's right. And it's trying to give a lot of the students something to look forward to. It's one of those things where it might not be school, and uncovering what the issue is at home is so important. I use this as an example. So Flint, in 1970, the total enrollment of Flint Public Schools was around 50,000. The most recent count, it was less than 5,000, like 4,600, 4,700 in that period of time. So you look, I mean, it's just been decimated. The one thing that hasn't changed is the geography. This year is the first year, so all of the high schools that have been in Flint, there's one athletic team now, so they consolidated. But once again, the geography is the same. So why aren't kids getting to school? Well, it could be a situation where, well, I was going to school, but you closed that school. Now I have to try to find the resources, try to find a way to a school that's nowhere near me. But if you don't take the time to try to find that out, you might think, oh yeah, you're not coming to school. You don't want to come to school. But it's just like a big onion trying to peel back the layers and trying to figure out what the reason is for that. And then some of the schools, Detroit is a larger geographic area, a lot of different schools there too, but once again, a lot of schools have closed, so it's a huge challenge to try to get to school. So those are just some of the things. And then everybody knows stories, other stories that are quite grim why kids aren't making it to school. But it's just having that compassion and breathing this positive culture into a school. So if a student does miss 4 or 5 days, it's not, hey, where the hell you been? It's more of a, man, school's much better when you're here. And are there some issues going on at home? Anything I can help you out with? So that's a critical component of it. And you mentioned, what was the, I forgot that question too. What were you?
Well, I was thinking about your role as a partner, and just if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah.
But certainly what you spoke to was awesome as well, Dave. So no worries. You don't have to.
Thank
you
you.
don't have to.
Yeah, partner-wise, and I think beginning at the top as well. So we are Mentor Michigan. I actually spent time prior to my position with this. I was doing some contractual work for the state of Michigan. And I put together the donations management plan for the water crisis, which was huge. But I knew people in Flint, and that's what worked out well with that. So working with the state, it's a blessing and a curse. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. But when I was working for the state of Michigan, trying to weave through all the challenges in Flint, and then we go into Detroit too. But you have to have compassion for people. Yeah, people will see right through that. So from a building a community and just building, I think it just starts with being genuine. I think about the youth programs that I've done in the past too. Initially, there was that cloak of suspicion. And then you get past that, and then people find that you're generally interested in making their lives better. So I think that's kind of the foundation for building a good, good community model.
Thank you so much. And I think, Dr. Davis, you have one more comment to finish us off.
Yes, just wanted to add that by looking or seeking out the root causes of why students are not coming is not to assume that there's something wrong with the student, but is to help connect them to resources that the school or our partners may have access to. Just wanted to give one brief example. Last year in one of our pilot schools, one of our pilot sites, the principal there polled 20 students and that were chronically absent, and 8 of them mentioned the reason why they had not been coming regularly is because they did not have clean clothes, and so they were embarrassed to come to school with musty armpits or stains and so forth, and they were waiting for the family to take the clothes to a laundromat and so forth. And so what the principal said to himself is, I want to remove this from being a reason why students are not coming to school. And so he raised money and purchased a washer and dryer. And so from that point forward, and it's still going on this school year, students can bring dirty clothes with them to school. Their clothes are washing and drying while they're in class, and they can take home a sack of clean clothes on the backside. So definitely we approach that from the standpoint of how do we help young people and remove some of the barriers that stand in their way.
Thank you so much.
Can I-
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I
quickly,
just
yes.
want to add to Dr. Davis's point. This is not a sales pitch for All Here. I have no investment in it. But one thing the All Here data did show us as we tried to get to the core, 80% of the students, according to the mentors last year, 80% of the students indicated that course performance was the core issue for why they had anxiety coming to school, and the family issues were at 15%. So we're trying to dig deeper on what is it about the course performance, and we're going to leave the family issues. That's a separate component, but specifically, we were a little surprised that it was that high, that it was course performance.
Right. Absolutely. Well, sorry. What? Oh, the question was, what age group was that? Was that high school?
This was randomized, so it was pretty much K through 12, different schools, different questions around it.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists. I know we didn't have as much time for questions as we would have liked, but Daryl, Dave, Harold, thank you so much for your comments. I think what stands out to me as a commonality is just your authenticity in the way that you understand the problems that your students are facing, all 3 of you, in your role as partner, as leader of this work. And that's so important, obviously, for all of the reasons that we talked about, that you can, inspire and motivate other people to take this seriously and move this work forward. So I just want to thank the 3 of you and everyone in the audience for your attention. Beth has just a quick activity to wrap us up.
All right, so just, we're not done. Now you gotta do work. On the other side of your discussion handouts, it says, take one small action. So I never like to leave people with just information. You need to do something. So if you can think, what's one small thing in which you can raise the level of value of relationships in your system when you go back? What's one more thing you can do? And people on Facebook, if you can jot this down in your little notepad next to you, that would be great. What's one action step that you can take to systemically raise the importance of relationship in your system? And then take that home, hang it up by your desk, and when you have nothing to do, look at that list and say, oh yeah, I can do. No, you can integrate that into your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If we could give one more round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Beth.